Yeah. Good stuff.
Is there certain flavors and stuff? Is there different flavors? I know there's
different. I had some real stuff down the shore. It's like vinegar and swamp water and all kinds of nasty stuff, yeah.
So is there a certain brand that you like?
Kavita? I don't know. This is all white, so I get it. Yeah.
Does that not have apple cider vinegar?
It's got something sour in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not the sweetest stuff.
No, it's...
Yeah. No, not at all. Hi, everybody. Glad to see all of you. Welcome back to Teaching the Bible Cover to Cover. Again, I'm Michael Kotch, and let me get this straight. This is our 7th meeting today. Let's start off with prayer. Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, thank you for gathering us all here today. Thank you for the fellowship. Thank you for providing us with your word. Thank you for everybody's safe gathering here. While we go over your word, please make it so that I say whatever you want me to say, so that it's your word coming out and not my interpretation. And please make it so that it resonates with people and they enjoy it and it sinks into their heart and they adapt it into their lives and come back for more. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. All right, well, welcome back. I'm going to start off like I always do with my little timeline to catch us up to speed with where we're at with everything. God, then Adam and Eve, then Cain and Abel, then a huge time jump, like thousands and thousands of years time jump. Then the earth was so bad that God had to start over, and he started over with Noah, and then they got out of the ark, Tower of Babel, another huge time jump, thousands of years, we believe, and then we get to Abraham. We had Abraham and his son Isaac and his son Jacob. And his son Jacob had 12 sons, which started the 12 tribes of Israel. One of his sons was Joseph. They all moved to Egypt due to a famine, and Joseph kind of saved them. And they lived in Egypt for a while, and that's where they had their children, their grandchildren, and they multiplied to a great many number of people. Pharaoh said, "Who are these Israelites?" A new Pharaoh, I don't know who they are. They might turn against us in battle. We need to get rid of them. Turn them into slaves. And we have a 430-year time passes. Moses saves them, gets them out. God set the land aside for them, the land of Canaan, to go into. They send in spies as God instructed them to, and they come back and said, the people are too big. We don't think we can take them. We're not going to do it. So God said, fine, you won't go in. Your children will go in. You're going to wander out here until all you people who didn't think I could get this land for you die off. And that's what happened. They died off. Then they went into the land of Canaan, now Moses died. They're led by Joshua. And Joshua and the Israelites invaded the cities of the Canaanites and other people, moved them out, and they moved in and began Israel. After a little while, the people would kind of rebel against God. This is a theme. We're going to see it all through the Bible. We're going to see a lot of it tonight, where people at some point decide we don't really want to follow you too much and start to do whatever they want to do against God's repeated warnings. So God let them be invaded by other people and taken over, and they would repent, and God would save them. That's been a cycle. You raise up these judges to save them. And we went over Deborah and Barak and Gideon and Samson. And then after a while, some of the judges became corrupt, and the people said to the prophet Samuel, hey, tell God we don't want judges anymore. We don't like them. We want kings like all the other countries around us. And Samuel went to God, and God said, I don't want them to have kings. I'm their king. Oh, they pestered him. And he said, okay. God said, I'll give them a king, but they'll have trouble with kings if that's what they want. And he said, that's what we want. So the first king was King Saul, and this is where we're going to slow down. I'm going to get into it a little bit. We're going to move forward, but I want to make a point. King Saul, God anointed King Saul as the first king of Israel, and he anointed him based on what the people would want. God judges the heart. The people judge by what they see. This was a 7-foot-tall guy, very handsome, very athletic. And this is, if you're looking at somebody, this is a guy you might pick to be your leader because he looks great. That's why God anointed him. But he didn't turn out well. Here's the point. Saul was a nothing. He was a regular guy, regular Joe like you and me. God picked him to be king. After he became king, he started thinking, I could do whatever I want to do as king. I don't need to follow God. He rebelled against him, did all kinds of stuff he was told not to. Led to his downfall. God said, well, I'll replace him with a man after my own heart. And he picked this shepherd boy named David to become king. David wasn't nothing. He was like one of us, he was a kid. He was a shepherd, and back then shepherds were on one of the lowest rungs of society. God picked him to be king. He would have been nothing if he just would have been a shepherd, I guess, if God didn't pick him. He became king because God picked him. And he was fine until he became king. He was a great guy. And once he became king, he thought he could do whatever he wanted to do. And he had this whole tragedy with Bathsheba and killing her husband Uriah and trying to cover it up. And but he repented, and God restored him, but there were some natural consequences for what he did. He had problems the rest of his life, but he remained as king. And still today, God said, I'll make your name famous forever, and we still have Israel flag has a star of David on it. He's still known as the greatest king. Well, then he had a son, Solomon, and again, he became king. The only reason why he was king was because he was King David's son. He didn't do anything. He didn't earn it. He didn't do anything great to become king. He just King David's son. And David himself was anointed by God. He didn't even do anything to earn it. And when Solomon got in to be king, God gave him all this wisdom, and he didn't use it. He got 700 wives and 300 concubines. And he started, God warned him repeatedly, do not marry foreign women for the main reason of they will pull you away and you're going to start worshiping their gods instead of me. And that's what he did. He was worshiping all these pagan gods, the Baals and the Asheroths and all this stuff who required human sacrifice and all kinds of perverted stuff. So God said, I'm going to tear the kingdom out of your son's hand, and I'm only going to leave one remaining. Well, he had a son, Rehoboam, and he became king. And again, Rehoboam, what did he do to earn to be king? Nothing. He was a king's son. All right, you're the king's son, you become king. He didn't do anything special to become king. And but he got elevated up to his position as king, and the people came to him and said, "Hey, King Rehoboam, your father Solomon was very hard on us." Now again, these are 12 tribes of Israel. Your father Solomon was very hard on us. If you lighten the burden on us and aren't as hard on us as your father Solomon, we'll follow you. And he said, "Well, let me think about this. I'll let you know in 3 days." And he asked the elders. And they said, yes, yeah, do that. That's a great idea. They'll follow you forever. Then he asked his young friends who had no experience, and they said, tell them, you think my father is hard? I'm going to be 10 times harder. Wait till you see what I do to you. And what my father did was nothing. That's what he did. He went back and said, the weight of my finger is going to be heavier than the whole weight of my father's body, the burden he put on you. He whipped you with whips, I'm going to whip you with scorpions. Well, the people said, we're not following you. And the king of Israel now split up. 10 tribes broke away. And they still kept the name Israel, but they no longer followed the line of David. They got their own king named Jeroboam. And only 2 tribes remained following King Rehoboam, which was Judah and Benjamin, and they became the tribe of Judah. So now it's split into the northern tribe of Israel with 10 tribes and Judah with 2 tribes. Okay, what's the point? First of all, I want to make another point. I've been remiss if I didn't bring this up yet. I don't think I have. Whenever you read the Bible, whenever you have anybody teach you the Bible, you always have to ask yourself, what can I take from this? How can I use it in my own life? That's one of the main purposes of reading the Bible. It's not just a bunch of stories about people that happened 1,000 years ago in Israel. The Bible says, in one part it says, why is all this focus on Israel? And God's answer was, because I'm using Israel as an example for everybody to follow. So the things that happen in the lives of the people, the things that happen in individual lives and all the teachings, it's all meant for us to take and use in our own lives. So whenever you hear anything from the Bible, you want to think, can I apply that in my life? Now, you can't apply everything. There's a lot of stuff you can't apply. And trust me, if you learn what the Bible teaches and you apply it in your life will be transformed. You won't be the same. Back to my point. So you have these 4 kings. All of them didn't earn being king. It was given to them by God. And once they got into that position, they decided, I'm hot stuff. I can do whatever I want to do. Who else did that happen to? We talked about it in the first session. You see him in picture of red suits and horns, pitchfork. Satan, right? The Bible says, God described Satan. He said, I made you. I made you an anointed cherub. I appointed you. I placed you. You know, there's nothing new under the sun. And a lot of stuff that happened with Satan, a lot, will happen on a smaller scale with kings. The same thing. Satan did not earn his position. It wasn't like, he was just a regular guy. He did all these wonderful things, became an angel, and he earned it. God gave him everything he was. And he got enamored with how beautiful he was. He got enamored with the position that's clear God gave him. And he decided, I'm above everybody. I can do whatever I want. The same thing with the kings. Right? They didn't earn this, given them by God, and they got to one point and said, I'm king, I can do whatever I want. No, you can't. How can you use this in your life? Think, whenever something great happens in your life, you're in a position over other people, or you're in an exalted position, or things are going good, don't forget who's behind everything. If God took his presence away from you for a second, you would turn to ashes. Okay, the Bible's clear. Jesus holds everything together. If he backed off for a second, your molecules will fall apart. The only reason why your heart is beating and you're breathing is because God allows it. Use that. There's a lot of failures in the Bible, like how these kings failed. Some were redeemed, some weren't. But it's to learn from. So when you hear any of these things, you want to be thinking, how can I apply this in my life? So we're going to move forward. We're going to hear about two prophets, Elijah and Elisha. And it gets tongue-tied because they keep intermixing. It's, so close. So this is during the time of, this is in the kingdom of Israel. This is after the kingdom split up. So you have the northern kingdom of Israel that has 10 tribes. And you have the southern kingdom of Judah, now that has 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin. And this is a man named Elijah, and he's in the northern kingdom of Israel. So God raised up a prophet named Elijah in the kingdom of Israel. Now, again, a prophet's a guy that God picks and says, you're a messenger between me and the people, or I'm going to have you as like an intermediator, So he picked this guy Elijah, and he gave Elijah the power to do mighty miracles so that the people would believe he was a prophet sent by God. For instance, he made it so it didn't rain in the area for 3.5 years. And everybody was like, they all realized he was a special guy because he could do all these things that God allowed him to do. And the reason why he did it was not to make Elijah famous, but to realize this is a guy sent by God. He's not just some guy talking. He could do all these miracles. Now, at this time in Israel and in Judah, many of the people in Israel were following God. However, many of the people were also following a false and evil god named Baal, B-A-A-L. Right? So in Israel, some people are following God, some people are following Baal, many were following both. They would go to the temple on Saturday and worship God, and on Tuesday they would go to the temple of Baal and engage in human sacrifices. And God said, this has got to stop. So he sent the prophet Elijah to the people of Israel, and he said, how long will you people go back and forth deciding which God to follow? If God is God, then follow him. If Baal is God, then follow Baal. But you can't follow both. You have to pick one. So Elijah decided to put the followers of Baal and the prophets of Baal to a test in front of all the people. He said, listen, everybody, gather. Basically, he spoke in front of Israel, and he spoke in front of the prophets of Baal. He said, I'm the only prophet of God here, but we have 450 prophets of Baal here. Why don't we find out who's the real God here? And this is what we're going to do. I'm going to get a bull, and I'm going to kill it, and I put it on top of a pile of wood. And I want the prophets of Baal, you could go get a bull too and kill it and put it on a pile of wood. And I will call out to God to rain fire down from heaven to burn the bull up and the whole pile of wood. And you prophets of Baal can call out to Baal and ask him to send fire down from wherever he's from and burn everything up. And whichever one does that, that's a true God. And the people said, that's a good idea. Yeah, we're for that. And the prophets of Baal said, yeah, we'll do that. So the 450 prophets of Baal went first. They killed a bull and they put it on a big pile of wood. And they cried out to Baal from morning until noon to send fire down from the sky. And they yelled for so long, they're losing their voices, they're limping, and they started cutting themselves. Oh, Baal, we're bleeding for you, we're bleeding for our God, and they're screaming and dancing. And it went on so long, they started passing out, and they couldn't talk anymore. And then so Elijah's just sitting here watching this, and he says to him, you keep yelling at Baal. He's a God, I'm sure he'll show up. I don't know, maybe he's goofing off. Maybe he's going to the bathroom in a bush somewhere. Maybe you got to go find him. Maybe he went on a trip somewhere and he's lost. Maybe he fell asleep. Somebody might have to go wake him up, and they're all yelling at him. Well, keep yelling to him. I'm sure he'll come because he's a god. Well, the people just yelled themselves out, and they're exhausted and passed out and bleeding and sweating, and nothing happened. So then Elijah now called the people of Israel over to his pile of wood with the bull on it. And he laid 12 stones around his pile, and this represented 12 stones of Israel. Then he had the people completely soak the pile of wood with water, so it would be impossible to light it. Okay, so it's just, they didn't have gasoline back then, so it wasn't like some, soaked in gas to trick them. He soaked it with water. And then Elijah prayed out to God. And he said, O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and you have turned their hearts back. And as soon as he finished saying this huge fireball came roaring down from heaven, landed, burned up the wood, burned up the bull, burned up the water, burned up everything. And when the people saw it, they all fell on their face and started saying, the Lord, he's God, the Lord, he's God. And then Elijah said, yes, he is. Now pick one. You can't follow both. And they said, we're going to follow God. And he just had the prophets of Baal. I think he had them exterminated. He got rid of them. Now, shortly after this, you see this in real life. Somebody, they'll win a gold medal and then they'll have problems or whatever. Right after this happened, this is a great event for Elijah. He proved God was the real God, and he defeated the prophets of Baal, and he defended he turned all of Israel back to following God. But right after this, he became really depressed. He went into depression. And he just felt at some point like he was the only person in Israel that really loved God. He felt like I'm putting all of my work into this and all this effort, and I don't know, I just feel like nobody cares about God but me. And he got really depressed. And God actually sent him some angels and brought him food and everything. And he said, listen, God said, I'm going to give you a helper. Okay, so it's not just going to be you. So God appeared to Elijah, and he assigned the prophet Elijah a person who was going to be his apprentice and eventually was going to take his place. And this new prophet that God anointed to help Elijah out, his name was Elisha, which is spelled a little bit different. Now, during Elijah's life as a prophet, God gave him the power to do many miracles so that people would believe he was a prophet of God. And one day, God told Elijah that he would take him up to heaven while he was still alive. Elijah asked his replacement, Elisha, if he could do anything for him before God takes him to heaven. And Elisha said, yeah. Have God give me a double portion of your spirit. Now, Elijah's doing all these miracles, so I don't know if that was the reason, but Elisha was like, whatever you got, ask God to give it to me. So Elijah said, well, my spirit's not for me to give, but if it's okay with God, it's okay with me. And then while they were talking, God sent down chariots of fire and chariots of horses from heaven that separated Elijah and Elisha. And God took Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind while he was still alive. Now, Elijah's only one of two people in the whole Bible that went up to heaven while they were alive. He is one, and there's another one in the Old Testament we didn't really talk about. His name is Enoch. That's basically all they mention about him. He was Noah's grandfather, so this is way, way, way back. And he was around, and it said he was a man of God and a good guy, and at one point God took him up to heaven while he was alive. So Elijah and Enoch are the only two people that went up to heaven while they're still alive. Now, when Elijah went up to heaven, a double portion of the Spirit was given to Elisha like he asked. Now, Elisha also had power to do great miracles. And the miracles God gave Elisha the power to do included parting a body of water and walking through it on dry ground, as Moses did with the Red Sea during the Exodus, causing water to appear out of nowhere and form pools so that people had water to drink, causing food to keep appearing in a poor woman's house to prevent her and her son from starving, making it so that a childless woman gave birth to a son, bringing a boy back to life who had died, removing the poison from poisoned food so people could eat it, and healing a man of leprosy. Now, while Elisha was the prophet of Israel, Israel was at war with Syria. And the king of Syria hated Elisha because every time they're going to go to attack Israel, God would tell Elisha, hey, the Syrians are coming, come over here, and he would tell the army and he would stop it. So this king of Syria is pulling his hair out like, God's telling him all of our secrets, we got to get rid of this guy. So the king of Syria sent a big portion of the army in just to kill Elisha. And the army tracked him down and I guess, got near him or surrounded him. When that happened, God sent God's army down from heaven, soldiers on fiery horses and chariots from heaven. And when the king of Syria or the army saw, they just, they almost fell over in fright, because I could only imagine what God's army must look like. And the king of Syria said, I don't think I'm going to go after Elisha anymore. That's fine. I'll just leave him alone. He just quit, because I can't fight that. All right, now we're going to hear about the fall and exiles of Israel and Judah. Israel and Judah became, again, rebellious, turning away from God. It's one of the main things we see throughout the Bible. People will just turn away from God, and despite God's repeated warnings to them, please come back, and then threats, if you don't come back, this is what's going to happen, they just thumb their nose at him. And one of the things you have to understand, especially with Israel, is God will discipline Israel, and he has, but he never destroyed them. There's a difference. He would allow these bad things to happen to discipline them, but so that they learn and repent and change their ways. Because as you well know, Israel's still here. And he said, I never ever meant to destroy Israel when these things happened, but it's to discipline them because they got very bad. So we're going to hear about what happened. Now, during the period of the kings, there were many good kings over Israel and Judah, but even more bad ones who did not follow what God instructed them to do. They ignored God's instructions and did what they wanted to do. Sometimes their actions were very sinful. Eventually, God ran out of patience with these bad kings of Israel and Judah. Israel, however, at this point was much worse than Judah in rebelling against God and following the false gods of other countries instead of God. God warned them many times through the prophets to stop doing this and return to him, but they would not listen. Since the kings and the people of Israel did not want to follow God's instructions, God took his help and protection away from Israel. They were conquered by the Assyrians, and they were taken away to Syria as captives in an exile. And then God's quote was, and this occurred because the people of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord drove out before the people of Israel, and the customs that the kings of Israel had practiced. And the people of Israel did secretly against their Lord, their God, things that were not right. Some of the practices the people of Israel engaged in included sacrificing their own sons and daughters to Baal and other false gods. So they got into the pagan practices. I don't know why they would do this, but they did repeatedly. Got into practices of sacrificing their own children. Of course, this upset God greatly. And the Bible quotes, therefore the Lord was very angry at Israel and removed them out of his sight. None is left of the tribe of Judah only. So at this point now, God took his protection off them, and Assyrians came in and not only defeated Israel, but carried the people away to Assyria. So they're like taken as captives now, and they're in Assyria. It's called one of the Exiles. Now over time, the kingdom of Judah also greatly offended God by following the evil practices of the pagan nations around them. One king of Judah was particularly evil, and his name was King Manasseh. He rebuilt the temples to worship false gods and demons. He also put altars to these false gods in the holy places of Judah. So he put like demon altars in the Jewish temple, that was dedicated to God. He instructed the people of Judah to worship these other gods. King Manasseh burned his own son alive as a sacrifice to these evil and false gods. And this is the king of Israel, burning his own son to demon gods. As a consequence, God took his protection away from the kingdom of Judah. The kingdom of Judah was captured by the very powerful king of Babylon named King Nebuchadnezzar. God says he used him as his hammer. Whenever God, now he's a pagan god, whenever God wanted to discipline somebody, he would incite Nebuchadnezzar to come in. If you heard Nebuchadnezzar's coming, you better do your last will and testament, because he would just come in and just stomp you right out. Now the people of the kingdom of Babylon, which Nebuchadnezzar was the king of, were called the Chaldeans. Now what Nebuchadnezzar did, again, God wasn't trying to destroy Israel, but discipline them. So they were so bad, so God backed off to protection. This powerful king Nebuchadnezzar came in. But what he did was, when he conquered them, he took away all the nobility and the really highly skilled people back to Babylon as exiles, and he left the rest of the people there. So all the upper crust and nobility and doctors and whoever had skill or whatever it may be, come on, you're going to come to Babylon as exiles, and he left the rest behind. And he carried back to Babylon all of Judah's treasures, so all the riches and the stuff in the temple he took. Now, he took these people away, but there's still a lot of people left. Again, he only took the top of the people. So he said, okay, I'm going to leave these. Now this is a providence of King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. This is Judah and Jerusalem. So I need somebody to run it. So he picked this guy named Zedekiah, and we're going to learn more about him later. He said, Zedekiah, you're going to be king over Israel, or you're going to be king over Judah and Jerusalem under me. Yeah, great, I'm king. Well, when Zedekiah got in there, very shortly he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar and just rebelled against them. So King Nebuchadnezzar came back and reinvaded Jerusalem because of this, because of his rebellion. And this time they killed or captured everyone who was in the city except for the absolute poorest people. So they took either they killed everybody or took a lot of them back to Babylon. And the only people they left were like the homeless people, people who had absolutely nothing. They left them there. Also, because King Nebuchadnezzar was so mad about this rebellion against him by a guy he appointed as king, he burned down all the important buildings in the kingdom to the ground. He burned the temple down, and he broke the walls down and surrounded Jerusalem. And anything left that was valuable, he carried back to Babylon. So basically, Jerusalem now was just a shell. Everything was smashed, taken, stolen, and just a bunch of poor people who had nothing to offer to give were left there. But we're going to learn about God's restoration. Again, God did this to discipline. He didn't do it to destroy. So as bad as these devastating things were to Israel that God allowed to happen, this is how miraculous what he's going to do next to restore them. And it's truly an act of God, because when you hear this, this wouldn't happen on its own. Okay? So within a few decades after the kingdom of Judah was conquered by the Chaldeans and its citizens were exiled to Babylon, the Babylonian kingdom transitioned to the kingdom of Persia, which is like Israel now. Or not Israel, Iran, northern Iraq. And it said not even a shot was fired. So King Nebuchadnezzar was the leader of Babylon, and somehow over like a 70-year period, it transitioned into a different kingdom, I guess peacefully. Now it's called the Persian kingdom. Now the Persians had a king named Cyrus. And so where it gets really, really miraculous from God. God stirred the spirit of King Cyrus to help the captured people of Judah and return them to their home. King Cyrus made a proclamation that the people formerly of Judah that were now exiled in Persia were to return to Judah to rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is God who is in Jerusalem. The temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon when his army conquered Jerusalem and the territory of Judah. The people of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin and the priests and the Levites were stirred up by God to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple of God. King Cyrus of Persia returned all of the precious items that former King Nebuchadnezzar carried away to Babylon when he conquered Judah. Several thousand people and their descendants who are now exiled in Persia as a result of King Nebuchadnezzar's conquering Judah, now returned to Judah under the proclamation of King Cyrus to rebuild the house of God. All right, so Nebuchadnezzar came and wiped them out and took everything away. Now they're just captives in this kingdom of Persia, right? They have nothing. They're not even citizens. This is how God moved the king. The king got an idea. You know what? All these people that we conquered and we have them here now, I'm going to send them all back home, and I'm give them back everything. All the treasures, everything we took, I'm going to give them back. I'm going to help them rebuild their temple, and I'm going to make them a country. Now, who would do that unless God, restored them? Or God stirred this guy's heart. Because he had no reason to do that. I mean, these were captured people now. He gave everything, all the treasures. He said, yeah, take them all back. Go ahead, go home. You can all go home now, So after delay in rebuilding the temple due to the interference from enemies of the people of Judah, some people didn't want Judah to be restored. The temple was finally finished, so now the temple is built back up again. Okay, the first temple was built by King Solomon, And because of rebellion and falling away from God, or whatever, Nebuchadnezzar burned it down. And then later on, the same kingdom allowed them to rebuild it. So this is the second temple. And I believe this temple stood until 70 AD. This second temple was a temple that was there when Jesus was there. Okay, it was burned down again in 70 AD because the Israelites kept rebelling against Rome. And in 70 AD, they came in, they just wiped the city out, burned everything down. And that's when the Jews were scattered all over the world until 1948. So this temple that they rebuilt is going to stand for a while. God sent a man named Ezra, we're in the book of Ezra now. God sent a man named Ezra to teach the Israelites about God. He was a scribe skilled in the law of Moses that the Lord, the God of Israel, had given, and the king granted him all that he asked, for the hand of the Lord was on him. Well, yeah, whenever you hear that in the Bible, the hand of the Lord is on somebody or the Spirit of God's with them, they do miraculous things. And the hand of the Lord was on Ezra. For Ezra had set in his heart to study the law of the Lord and to do it and teach the statutes and rules in Israel. He's going to reteach Israel about their faith because they've been exiles now for a couple generations and they lost everything. They're in another culture. He's going to reteach them. Ezra was now both a priest and a scribe. King Artaxerxes of Persia instructed Ezra to appoint magistrates and judges who may judge the people in the areas of Judah and to teach them the laws of Ezra's God. So this foreign Persian king said, I want you to teach all the people who are exiled, reteach them about your God. Reestablish your culture. It's amazing. God's hand was in it. Now Ezra took several hundred men with him from Babylon and went and rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem as King Artaxerxes had instructed him. Ezra became the head priest at the temple in Jerusalem, and he served the Jews that returned to Judah from the exile in that capacity. Now we're going to read the book of Nehemiah. Oh, we're good. Now, when King Nebuchadnezzar of the Chaldeans captured the city of Jerusalem and carried the people off to Judah into exile into Babylon, we just heard about this, he broke down Jerusalem's protective walls and burned down its important buildings. The second time he had to come in when his own hand-picked king rebelled against him. He just came in and wiped the city out, burned the temple down, burned the houses down, either killed or took everybody except for the poorest people, knocked the walls down. It was just in ruins. Now there's a Jewish man named Nehemiah who was still in exile in Persia under King Artaxerxes. Now, Artaxerxes is this king who God stirred him up to say, hey, you Jewish people, why don't you go back and rebuild your temple? I'll allow it. I think that's great. And you could go and reestablish your culture and your faith, and you could reteach your people. God stirred him up. And he was the king, and this Nehemiah was the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. So although he's in exile, he was his cupbearer, which is an important position. He's the one who tasted the food, makes sure nobody poisoned it. Now Nehemiah heard that for the remnant of the people living in Jerusalem, the wall of the city remained torn down and its gates destroyed. Nehemiah prayed to God that God would fix the situation. While Nehemiah was serving the king as his cupbearer, King noticed that Nehemiah looked sad. King Artaxerxes said to Nehemiah, "Why is your face sad, seeing you're not sick? There's nothing but sadness in your heart." And Nehemiah became afraid of this. He didn't know what to say. However, he gathered his courage and said to the king, "Let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad? When the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire." So the king asked Nehemiah what he wanted from him. "Hey, well, I'm the king. What could I do for you?" And Nehemiah asked the king, "Could you send me to Judah to help rebuild the homeland? I know they're working on the temple. You commissioned that, and that's great, but there's a lot of other stuff that's wrecked, especially the wall. Like, even if we get this temple built up, there's nothing protecting it. Could I go back and maybe rebuild the wall?" So the king asked him, "Well, how long are you going to be gone? And what do you think you're going to need?" And Nehemiah thought, we told him, "Well, I don't know, I'll be gone this long. That's what I think I'll need." And when Nehemiah told him how long he thought it would take him to do this, the king granted his request. The king also wrote letters to the rulers of territories under his dominion to give Nehemiah whatever he needed to rebuild the city and rebuild the wall. And Nehemiah said, "The king granted me what I asked for here's the saying again, for the good hand of my God was upon me." So God's hand was on Nehemiah and on everybody else around him. So I guess the discipline's over. They learned their lesson, they repented, so now God's going to restore them. So Nehemiah gathered a group of Jewish men, and they began to rebuild the walls and the gates of Jerusalem that had been destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon several years earlier. They encountered opposition and threats of violence from several people who did not want the Israelites to rebuild Jerusalem. Nehemiah and his men also faced oppression from local officials as they worked. Throughout this, they prayed to God for guidance and protection, and God provided both for them. With God's help, it took Nehemiah and his men only 52 days to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem. I don't know how big Jerusalem was back then, but to build a whole wall around the whole city, it only took them 52 days. The enemies who were trying to stop them, didn't want them to do this, realized, oh my goodness, they rebuilt this wall in 52 days, God must be with them. And they realized that God was with them. They didn't want to mess with God, so they left them alone from that point on. They didn't give him any more hard times. Now, although the wall of the city, around the city, was now complete, there was only a few people living within Jerusalem, and none of the houses that were destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar were rebuilt. Remember, only the poorest people lived there, and the homes are still wrecked. However, shortly after the wall around Jerusalem was rebuilt, 42,360 people returned from the Babylonian exile back to the areas of Jerusalem and Judah, along with approximately 7,500 male and female servants. So basically, the king of Persia said, yeah, your city's empty, and whoever wants to go back, you go back. And 50,000 people went back, and to Jerusalem, and it was territory of Jerusalem and Judah. All the people gathered together, and now Ezra the scribe and priest read the book of the law of Moses to them. They probably forgot it because they were exiled for 70 years and they were in another culture who just probably forbade this teaching. So they had to reteach them, basically a lot of the Old Testament up to this point. Nehemiah became the governor of the area. In Jewish religious worship practices, God finally began once again in the areas of Jerusalem and Judah. Now we heard in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah about how God slowly ended this discipline against Judah, but remember there's two kingdoms. There was Judah and there's also Israel. Now we're going to hear about something that happened in Israel. That was the 10 kingdoms. Judah was invaded twice and exiled twice by the Babylonians. Israel was invaded and exiled by the Assyrians, so they were carried away into Assyria. So we're going to hear about this family in Assyria, Israelite exiles. This story is really neat, okay? This next one is from the book of Tobit. And what's neat about it is you're going to get insight into how prayers actually get up to God, what God does with some of the prayers, how God uses angels, and some of the things demons can do to people. So it's a lot of insight from this book of how the unseen stuff that goes on in heavenly realms actually interacts with people. And it's a really neat story. So this is the book of Tobit. Now Tobit was an Israelite man who was taken captive with many other Israelites by the Assyrians. They were exiled to Assyria. They were taken to the city of Nineveh in the Syrian kingdom. As a young man, before he was taken captive, Tobit was faithful in making offerings to God at the temple in Jerusalem. So before the Syrian invasion and exile, he was a holy man. He wasn't a priest, but he used to, make a lot of offerings to God, and he really tried his best to follow God. Tobit married a woman named Anna, and they had a son which they named Tobiah. When exiled to the land of Assyria, Tobit's people began to eat the food of the Gentiles. Now Tobit refused to eat any food that was break his Jewish dietary laws. Because he followed God with all his heart, God showed favor on Tobit and gave him a good job as a purchasing agent for a rich ruler. Kombucha time. Yes, sir. Now, Tobit was a charitable man to the poor and unfortunate people. He went out of his way to take care of the poor, the sick, the people that needed help, the outcasts that everybody else would look down on. He would help these people. He also buried the dead that went unburied. Now, remember, he was in this Assyrian exile, so he was an Israelite. They took all the Israelites away. Now he's basically these captives in Assyria. And there's a new Assyrian king named Sennacherib, and at the time he would kill many Israelites in a fit of rage. So he would lose his temper and just kill Israelites. And he was the king, no one could stop him. And these were captive people, so they had no rights. So he would just go and get mad and start killing people. Well, he would leave them in the streets, and Tobit would sneak out at night and bury their unburied bodies. Now, when the king would come back and look for the people he killed, they were always missing, and he got mad, you know. And he eventually found out that this Tobit guy is burying all these Israelite people that I'm killing. And he got mad and he wanted to kill Tobit, you know. So he went after him, and he was hunted by the king to be put to death. And they confiscated his house and took all of his possessions, but Tobit and his wife Anna and their son Tobiah were able to escape. Now, it doesn't say God's hand this, but hand was in this, but it might have been. You know, this king's trying to kill Tobit and his family. 2 of the king's sons assassinated their father, the king. So this new king that came in, and his name is, God, I wish the name was King Bob. Esarhaddon. King Steve would be so much easier with some of these. Oh my goodness. He was one of the sons that assassinated his father, and he became king. And he's like, yeah, well, I know my dad was mad at you, Tobit. I don't care you're burying dead people. I got no problem with it. So he's able to move back. And there's nobody, you know, he wasn't hunted anymore. So he moved back from out of hiding in Assyria. Now, one day during the festival of Pentecost, this really nice dinner was prepared for Tobit. And it shows what kind of guy he is. Tobit instructed his son Tobiah to find a poor person who believed in God and bring him back to share the meal with him. Now, Jesus commanded this later. You know, when Jesus was here, and I can't wait till we get into teaching Jesus. Oh, it's awesome. We're not there yet, but we're going to get there. But one of the things he said, Jesus says, listen, when you give a banquet or a feast, don't invite the rich, don't invite the famous, don't invite all your friends, because they could pay you back. Instead, when you give a feast, invite the poor, the lame, the blind, the people that can't pay you back. And your Father in heaven will see this, and he will pay you back for it. Well, that's what Tobit was doing centuries before Jesus was here. You know, they gave this feast, and he told his son, go out and find some poor people and bring them in so they can have a nice meal. So he was a good, godly man. Now, one night, Tobit went out into his courtyard. He fell asleep next to a wall. While he was sleeping, there were sparrows up on the wall, and their droppings fell into his eyes. I guess he was sleeping on his back with his face up. And it caused scales to cover his eyes, and he went totally blind. Now, his wife Anna had to go to work weaving cloth to provide for the family because now the father, the husband, Tobit, was totally blind. One day, his wife Anna was given a goat in addition to her wages as a bonus. Now, Tobit thought she stole the goat. He didn't believe that. What do you mean you got it as a bonus? They don't get bonuses like that. I think you stole it. Well, they got in a big argument. And during the argument, his wife Anna just lashed out at him and said, you know, all your former charitable works are useless. You did all this good stuff for everybody. What did it get you? You're blind, and now I have to go out and work and support all of us. And Tobit became extremely depressed over this, over his blindness and all the stress was causing everybody else. So he prayed to God that God would take his life because he could no longer tolerate or endure the anguish of his blindness and all the pain and suffering and the stress was putting on his family. So he prayed to God, take my life. I can't stand this anymore. It's just a horrible spot I'm in. Now, at the same time, there was an extended family member of Tobit, and her name was Sarah. She was a lot younger. Sarah had a wicked demon. Now here you can hear what demons do. Sarah had a wicked demon named Asmodeus who desired her and followed her around. Sarah was married 7 times. On the wedding night of each marriage, the demon would kill the groom before they could consummate the marriage. You know, so this demon killed 7 newly married guys to Sarah before they could consummate the marriage. And on top of this, she had a maid that was taunting her about this. You know, you can't have a husband, you know, you never get a husband, this demon's killing all your husbands. And she was heartbroken about it. She was so upset she wanted to hang herself. But she wouldn't do it because she knew it would break her father's heart, and she was an only child. However, like her relative Tobit, she prayed to God that God would take her life because she just couldn't stand the pain of this anymore. I was married 7 times and lost 7 husbands on my wedding night. This is where another thing where it gets interesting. You see how one of the glimpses of how God works behind the scenes. Both Tobit and Sarah prayed to God at the same time for them to take their lives and end their unbearable grief. God heard both of their prayers. God sent the angel Raphael to heal both of them. Raphael was given a task to remove the white scales from Tobit's eyes so he could see God's light again with his own eyes. He was also instructed, and this is interesting, to give Sarah, the daughter of Raguel, to Tobiah, the son of Tobit, as a wife. So he basically, God said to angel Raphael, Sarah is meant to marry Tobit's son Tobiah, make sure it happens. So God set up a marriage that he said was meant to happen. And Raphael, while you're down there, I want you to heal this blindness in Tobit, get Sarah to marry his son, and get rid of this evil demon. So he sent him after this demon to get rid of him. Now Tobiah was the first one eligible to marry this Sarah because of his relationship, I don't know, the cousins or whatever, but I guess they had orders of like your first choice to marry, your second, your third. He was first in line, I guess, after the rest died. So on the same day that Tobit and Sarah prayed that God would take their lives, Tobit now remembered, this is the blind father, that he had money in a trust with a man named Gabriel in Media. He's probably thinking, now, I'm blind, my wife's out working, and you know, it's so stressful here, I just want to die. But wait a minute. A long time ago, I have all this money stored with this guy named Gabriel. That would help. I need to go get it. So Tobit called his son Tobiah to speak to him. And the first thing he did was he gave him advice on how he should live in life in a godly manner in a variety of areas in his life. So even though he's thinking, I can use this money, he calls his son, and the first thing he says is, follow God, pray to God. You know, he's a very godly man. And then he told his son Tobiah, hey, listen, I got something that could help us. I have 10 talents of silver stored with this guy named Gabriel in Media. Now I want you to go there and get it. You know, it's okay, it's mine. You know, he knows one day I'll be getting it. I want to get it now. So I want you to go there and get it. What I want you to do, though, is you don't know your way around Media, son. So go find somebody that knows their way around Media, a trustworthy person that could go with you. You know, bring him to me because I want to check him out. But go find somebody. We'll pay him. And I want you to have an escort there so nothing bad happens to you. So Tobiah went out and he found the angel Raphael to help him. Although he did not know that Raphael was an angel because it was hidden from him. Now this is interesting because in the New Testament there's a statement that says, be careful how you treat strangers. Treat them nicely because you never know when you might be actually interacting with an angel that you don't know about. This is what happened. You know, Tobiah went out to find a guy to guide him and found this guy. And he said, you'll see, he said his name is Azariah, but it was actually the angel Raphael. Now Raphael told Tobiah that he was one of his kinsmen who came looking for work. And he knew the way to and around Media. He also told Tobiah that he knew this guy Gabriel. Hey, you're getting money from Gabriel? I know him. Oh, it'd be easy. Well, I could go with you. I know this guy. Oh, great. So Tobiah brought Raphael to his father, Tobit, to see if he'd approve of him, taking him to Media as his guide. And the angel Raphael told Tobit that his name was Azariah, and he was one of his kindred, one of his relatives. So after talking with each other, Tobit said, this is a good guy, Tobiah. Take him with you. You know, he's a distant relative of us, and he seems trustworthy, and he knows the way to Media, and he knows Gabriel. That's where you're going to, so he's a perfect guy. On their journey to Media, Tobiah and Raphael camped along a river. I always thought this was funny. I'm going to giggle when I say it, but as Tobiah was washing his feet in the river, a big fish jumped out and tried to swallow his foot. I just find this funny. So the son was washing his foot in the river, and this big fish came and started chewing on trying to eat his foot. So Raphael said, hey, grab the fish, Tobiah, and kill it. And take out its gall, its heart, and its liver, and keep them, because you can use them for medicine. You can make great medicine out of that. So Tobiah followed the instructions of Raphael. Now Raphael later told Tobiah that if a person burns the fish's heart and liver, smoke can be used to rid a person of an evil spirit, and the spirit will never return. We just heard about somebody that had this demon, this Sarah, right? This demon was following her everywhere and killing all of her husbands. Tobiah didn't meet him yet, but he told him, hey, let's get rid of evil spirits. He said, oh, by the way, too, the gall you took out of the fish, if you know of anybody that's blind or has scales on their eyes, and rub that on their eyes, it'll heal them. Oh, my dad has scales on his eyes. Oh, good thing we got this fish then, So, when Raphael and Tobiah entered Media, Raphael told Tobiah that they must stay at this house of Raguel, a relative of Tobiah's. Now, Raphael told Tobiah that, hey, we got to stay at this relative. You don't know him well, but he is a distant relative of yours. His name is Raguel. He has this daughter named Sarah. Oh, and she's beautiful, and you're like an extended relative of hers. And, maybe you can marry her. Because from what I know about the family, like, you're the next in position to marry her. And I'll tell you what, if you do, she's an only child. And her father's estate, when she passed away, would be yours. And he said, why don't I talk to her father about letting her marry you if you want? Now, Tobiah said, I heard about this, Sarah. She's that lady that had 7 husbands that all died on the wedding night. You want me to marry her? No way, I'm not marrying her. What are you trying to kill me? He's like, no. He said, listen, remember that fish that we caught? Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, trust me. If you take their liver and whatever it is, their heart, and you put it on a fire, and the demon smells it, it's going to repulse him, and he'll never come back. Well, he must have been pretty persuasive, because Tobiah, I don't know if I would go with that. Like, this lady, 7 husbands died, and this guy tells him, oh, if you burn a fish thing, he'll scare you, it'd be fun. But he was persuasive, he believed him. So Raphael also reminded Tobiah that his father Tobit instructed Tobiah to go and get a wife from his own kinsman. So he said, listen, Tobiah, take some of the liver and the heart they took from the fish and put it on the embers in the bridal chamber. When the demon smells the smoke from them, he will flee and never return. Then Tobiah and Sarah, they need to pray to God, because, and this is important, well, interesting, he's an angel, so he knows this. He said, listen, Tobiah, God set apart Sarah to be your wife from before the world existed. God had this plan forever. Now, he didn't know he's an angel, but it's probably true. He said, she's been meant to be your wife since before the world existed. God meant her for you. So Tobiah was comforted by this. He said, okay, all right, take me to this Sarah lady. So Tobiah and Raphael arrived at Raguel's home. Now, Raguel was a cousin of Tobiah's father Tobit and the father Sarah. Raguel welcomed Tobiah warmly when he introduced him as Tobit's son. Tobiah asked Raguel to marry his daughter Sarah. Raguel happily agreed, because Tobiah was Raguel's closest relative, eligible to marry his daughter. But he warned him, he said, I'd love to have you marry my daughter, but you got to know, there's like 7 other guys that tried to marry her, and they all died on the wedding night. You sure you want to marry her? I'd love if you did, but I just, buyer beware. And Tobiah said, no, I want to marry her, and I want to marry her now. I don't even want to wait. So a marriage contract was drawn up, and Tobiah married Sarah that night. Now, when it's time to go to bed, Tobiah did as Raphael early instructed him to do. He took the liver and the heart of the fish out of the bag and put them on the embers intended for incense. The odor from this did repulse the demon. The demon fled and never returned. Tobiah and Sarah then prayed for God's blessing and protection. With the demon banished, nothing bad happened to Tobiah on his wedding night. In the morning, there was a big wedding feast. The father was probably, 8 times the charm, I guess. So they had a big party because the groom made it out alive in the morning. Sarah's father, Raguel, told Tobiah that because he is now his son-in-law, and for bringing joy to Sarah's afflicted spirit, Raguel gave Tobiah half of what he owned to take back to his father Tobit. Tobiah would inherit the other half when Raguel dies. So because, you married my daughter, and I'm giving you half of everything I have, Now, Tobiah was detained at this wedding feast. Back then, they had feasts that last for a long time. It was 2 weeks. So Tobiah was at his own wedding feast for 2 weeks. And he instructed Raphael, he said, hey, don't forget the main reason. I'm glad I got this wife, but don't forget the main reason why we came here is we got to go to Gabriel's house and get this 10 talents of silver. My dad needs it. He's poor. That's why we came. So that's what Raphael did. He went to Gabriel's house and got this 10 talents of silver that belonged to his dad. Now Tobiah was late returning home to his parents, Tobit and Anna. Tobit became worried because Tobiah was delayed by this 2-week wedding feast he knew nothing about. Like, he didn't know. He didn't have a phone back then. Okay, so he didn't know, like, what happened to him. He should have been back 2 weeks ago, but he's at a wedding feast. His mother, Tobiah's mother, panicked, and she was convinced somehow he must have died on the journey, something happened to him. And the poor mom, she was inconsolable. She would stand all day, every day on the road waiting for him to return, crying. She wouldn't eat, she wouldn't sleep, she cried all night, convinced that my poor son died. But during this time, Tobiah finally was on his way back to his father's house with half of all his father-in-law's possessions he brought with him. He gave them to him. Now Tobiah and Raphael returned back to Tobiah's parents, who greeted him with great joy and relief. Tobiah went up to his father Tobit, and he applied the fish gall to his eyes, as the angel Raphael instructed him to. He still didn't know he's an angel. And when he put the fish gall in his eyes, all the scales started peeling off. And for the first time in 4 years, Tobit could see. Tobit greatly praised God because his sight was restored. Tobiah explained to his father, Tobit, that not only did he get the money that he sent me to, but I got a wife too. I got married, and she's a relative of us, like you asked me to. Her name's Sarah. There's a great wedding feast now back at home. Thrown for Tobiah and Sarah lasted for another week, and there was great joy all through Nineveh for these exiles, the Israelite exiles. Now Tobit and Tobiah decided to give the man who served as a guide for Tobiah on his journey, the disguised angel Raphael, half of all the money was brought back. Okay, so he had half of his new father-in-law's inheritance, and he got 10 talents of silver. And again, his father Tobit was a good man. He said, listen, none of this would happen if it wasn't for this great guide that helped you. Give him half of everything. Give him half of your father-in-law's estate. Give him half of the 10 talents of silver, as he deserves it. So they did. And then Raphael told Tobit and Tobiah the following: bless God and thank him greatly for all the good things he has done for them. Proclaim all the good deeds God has done for them to others. Do good, and evil will not overtake them. Be generous in almsgiving, which purges sin and saves one from death. Now Raphael revealed to them who he actually was. And this is really interesting. Now this is an actual quote from the Bible. This is the angel Raphael talking to them. Now when you, Tobit, and Sarah prayed, it was I who presented the record of your prayer before the glory of the Lord. And likewise, whenever you would bury the dead. So, Tobit, because he was so heartbroken, he was blind, and it was so painful, prayed, God, take my life. That prayer went up, and the angel Raphael brought that to God. He also brought Sarah's prayer to God. And also, God watches what we do. Remember Tobiah, he would go out and bury these dead bodies that went unburied, and he would invite the poor people to dinner. Raphael brought that to God and said, hey God, this is what this guy down there, Tobiah, is doing. When you did not hesitate to get up and leave your dinner in order to go and bury the dead man, I was sent to put you to the test. It doesn't say what the test is, but just kind of deducing. It sounds like God might have said, this is a really good guy. Let's test if he really is a man who follows God in good and bad. Everything's been kind of okay for him. What would happen if he went blind? Would he still follow me? And he did. He put him to this test of blindness. Now, Raphael said at the same time, however, God sent me to heal you and your daughter-in-law, Sarah. I am Raphael, one of the 7 angels who stand and serve before the glory of the Lord. Now, Tobit and Tobiah were greatly shaken. They fell to the ground. And Raphael told them, do not have any fear. I did not do any of this on my own, but I was doing God's will. Therefore, bless God and give thanks to him. I am ascending now back to the one who sent me. Write down everything that's happened to you. And then Raphael ascended back up to heaven in front of them. Tobiah and Tobit praised and worshiped God. Now, a little bit also in the chapter, it says, Tobit prophesies about Jerusalem being restored by God one day in the future. Tobit lived to be 112 years old, and he was buried with honor in Nineveh. Just before Tobit died, he called his son Tobiah, along with Tobiah's 7 sons. So this son Tobiah, who married Sarah, at this point now, it's in the future a little bit, he's got 7 sons with Sarah. I don't know if there's a coincidence that Sarah had 7 husbands that died, now they have 7 sons, I don't know. But they had 7 sons. And this is what a prophecy that Tobiah gave them. He gave them a prophecy about future events in the city of Jerusalem. He told them that Jerusalem would be invaded and the temple would be burned, leaving the city desolate. However, God would bring the Israelites back to Jerusalem one day permanently. Israelites from all over the world would come to live in Jerusalem. They would live securely forever. That was a prophecy that's being fulfilled at the moment. Okay? He said one day in the future, the temple would be burned down. It was just rebuilt for the second time. For it to be burned down, that was when Jesus was here. Jesus came, he died at AD 33. And in AD 70, the Roman soldiers came in and burned it to the ground. And it was gone until 1948. At that time, God reestablished through His United Nation. Israel became a nation one day. And the Bible says once the Israelites return to their land, which they have in 1948, they're never going to leave again. You hear all this stuff about the Palestinians want their land and this and that. God said they will never leave again. So he was giving actually prophecy that's actually part of it's playing out today. That Israel, one day, the Jews will return permanently and they'll live there safely forever. Tobit told Tobiah and his sons to always do what is good in their lives in the eyes of God and give alms to the poor. So Tobit's still preaching good stuff. He then told Tobiah that after Tobit dies and is buried, take his family and immediately leave Nineveh and never look back. Because the city of Nineveh was a very wicked city. They're still exiles in Assyria now. Nineveh is the capital. I guess at one point they're going to be allowed to leave. When Tobit and his wife died and were buried, Tobiah and Sarah went back with their children and lived with Sarah's father, Raguel, in Media. Tobiah took good care of his father-in-law and his family. When his father-in-law, Raguel, and his wife died, Tobiah buried them in Media. He inherited their estate along with the estate of his father, Tobit. Tobiah lived to the age of 117. Before he died, he heard and saw the destruction of the city of Nineveh, like God said would happen, like his father said would happen. The inhabitants of Nineveh were led captive to Media by King Xerxes of Media. Tobiah rejoiced about how good God has been throughout his life till the day he died. Okay, that's it. When we meet now, next week we're going to be in the back of the church again because they're going to have Cub Scout meeting or something here. Okay, so same time. It's going to be Thursday at 6:30. And I'll email. Oh, if anybody, let me tell you something. If anybody has not been receiving emails from me, I send an email out every week stating where it's going to be at, what we're going to talk about. If you haven't, that means I don't have your email. Please write your name and email down, or at least your email address down on the sign-in sheet, so that I have them all. And I'm going to send emails out every week to let you know exactly where we're going to be. But next week it's at the church. And next week, we got two really good Bible stories. Two women heroes. Two separate stories, Judith and Esther. And these are two women that God used to save the Jewish people from extermination. Both times, an evil leader went to exterminate all Jewish people, kill them all off. And these two women both saved them. And they're really good stories. Okay. All right. Good night, everybody. Good seeing. If you have any questions, I'll be here afterwards. Thank you. You could come up and ask me. God bless all of you. Thanks for coming. Are you liking this so far? Is this helpful for all of you? Good. Okay. All right. Good. I love doing it. All right. Thanks. Hello.